Hello, everybody. My name is Sam Weeks. I am a full-time MBA admissions consultant, and today I'm with Alex. Now, Alex is in a very interesting situation because Alex has just managed to convert a MBA internship into a full-time offer via an MBA. So he's made the mythical transition into investment banking that everybody is hoping to do. Alex, can you tell us a bit about yourself?
Sure. I'll start with kind of a generic background and give you a little bit of the job background, career background. So, grew up in Baltimore, Maryland. Went to University of Maryland, College Park, studied bioengineering. Post grad, I worked in biotech venture capital for a few years, and more recently, prior to my MBA, I worked at a middle market private equity fund and a capital markets and kind of portfolio add-on role. Um, and yeah, I was in the role, had experience in finance and, biotech, and was looking for a future role that would really combine my past experiences, and came to investment banking specifically in healthcare coverage. So my goal going into my MBA program was specifically to get into a healthcare coverage group, and was successful, and I think I learned a lot along the way. So
Awesome. So can you talk about IB in general first? So a lot of people watching this and thinking, yeah, investment banking, it's glamorous, it's exciting, it's fast paced, it's quite well paid. Like, can you tell us about what you do within an investment bank and just sort of pull that curtain
sure.
for everybody?
Sure. More generally, investment banking is the part of banking that deals with large corporate transactions. So whether that be mergers and acquisitions, debt capital raising, or equity capital raising, all that is done through an investment bank. And I think, we could dig down a little deeper at the associate level. What you're doing is you're running those processes, and then you're also helping win the business for your MDs. You're helping win those deals by providing material and updating material for the MDs to talk with their clients about.
Right. Are the hours as long as everyone says?
They can be. It really depends a lot on the bank you go to and the group that you go to. Cultures vary very differently between banks and groups. So during the recruiting process, if you're a little sensitive to that, I think it's something you can definitely figure out and you should definitely ask about. But it can be. I know some people who have put in 110-hour weeks, and then I know some people who, put on an average of about 60. So it's really, really banking group dependent.
Yeah. Okay. So you mentioned the recruitment process there. Can you talk to us about what investment banking recruitment looks like when you're on the MBA? Because it's quite a
Sure.
specific process, right?
Yeah, it's a very structured process. And depending on which school you go to, it's also a little different. Um, and I'll speak to UNC, the school I went to say how it's done there. So basically, as soon as you apply and accept to UNC, and you've indicated that you're interested in investment banking, the investment banking board, which is made up of second year students who have successfully recruited for investment banking, will start to reach out or put their contact information in the school WhatsApps or group chats, and we'll start to have conversations, start prepping you for understanding the process and what it looks like. And what that process kind of looks like at UNC is basically the club will start preparing you. You'll start having coffee chats with club members to understand the, coffee chat process, what you're supposed to do, how you're supposed to present yourself. And then banks will start giving presentations um, at the school, and you'll start to meet alumni bankers. You will network with alumni bankers, and then you will eventually start to meet bankers outside the alumni network, and that will progress to a final interview. We either will get the offer or not get the offer, and the whole process is kind of like a funnel along the way, right? Like every kind of stage, you'll get indication if you're moving forward or if you're being cut. So that's kind of a very
How long
broad
does that take?
overview. How long? So I think prep starts mid-September, and then you start getting offers as early as I think late November, early December.
Okay.
So by the time your first semester has ended, you should know And I think it depends on the bank. Some of the banks do go into like the beginning of January.
Yeah. So what you're saying is it starts immediately. First year, right September, start of your
Yes.
first year of your MBA.
Yeah, and it's the earliest recruiting process of any job in the MBA program. So it's a really good, even if you're, not so interested or you're not sure about investment banking, it's a good idea to get involved as long as you're because it's good practice as long as you're not trying to recruit for something else that overlaps or precludes you from recruiting investment banking. For example, consulting. You can't recruit for consulting and investment banking at most MBA programs. But if you're interested in corporate finance and you're thinking investment banking might be for you, it's definitely a good idea to get involved in the process and see what it's like and if you can handle it.
Yeah, really good advice. So, okay, when you're meeting the recruiters for these banks, given that you've gone through the process and converted your offer, looking back, what do you think the recruiters are looking for
Yeah.
in the investment banking hires?
I think this is where a lot of people kind of make a mistake in what bankers are looking for. So a lot of people make the mistake that banking is a technical role. It is a technical role, but it's also a sales role, especially at the higher level. So they're really looking for people who present well, can tell good stories, and just generally have good conversation and communication skills. That is the number one thing they're looking for. And I think people put too much focus on the technicals. Yes, the technicals is necessary, but it's not sufficient to get you to the final, interview and get you the offer. There are even some banks where you can get to a final interview without doing any technicals, and they might not even ask you any technicals at the final interview because they figure, hey, you're in a top MBA program, you're smart, we'll teach you that. We need to know how you present and how you communicate with people. And I think that's the number one thing that matters and that people unfortunately, forget to really focus on.
Could not agree more. It's you're absolutely spot on. So tell me about the recruiting right now, because obviously interest rates are going up, deal volumes in some places are down. How's recruiting been impacted?
So I think recruiting has been impacted. Obviously it's become a lot more difficult. I think there's a lot fewer lateral options. So I think if you want to go to banking, I think an MBA is becoming a better and maybe one of the only options for certain people who are trying to get into IB. Because there's a structured process. You get a lot of face time with a lot of different banks. The other thing is that return offers for summer internships have been lower than they were in the past. So I think if you are going to do investment banking, you really have to focus after you get the summer internship. I think it used to be as long as you don't really mess up at most banks, you'll get a return. I think that's still the case at some banks, but I think you really want to spend that time prepping and making sure that you are as prepared as possible for the summer internship.
When you say about lateral transfers, can you just explain what you mean by that?
Sure, that means people who, are in an adjacent, well, sometimes there will be at a different investment bank. I think for those people, lateral transfers are still very much an option, but sometimes they'll be in a kind of adjacent role, maybe corp dev, maybe an FP&A, something like that, and they're trying to move to investment banking. And I think those seats are becoming less and less. And it used to be an option. Obviously, a lot of factors go into how well you could do that, your previous role, and then also, what undergrad you went to. All those things are factors. But yeah, I think the MBA is probably the best route given the current market.
It's kind of one of the last ways into investment banking now, really, isn't it? If you're not already in it,
Yeah.
You're in your mid-20s, you're not already in investment banking, an MBA is kind of your last route, really, right?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's also the most highest percentage of successful outcome for sure.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about specific schools. So can you talk to us about what was it at UNC that really propelled you into investment banking?
Sure. So at UNC specifically, they have a very structured process in training you. I can't give away everything because some of it's school secrets, but basically there's a few schools I think that have similar processes, but UNC is one of the most involved processes, and it's done through the investment banking club, and they really take an active role in teaching you, mentoring you, and making sure you're prepared. Um, and it's very hard to prepare on your own because you haven't done it before. And it's really a very unique process, and you really need someone who's done it before and been successful through the process to um, to have a good outcome, I think. And I think UNC is one of the few schools that really goes through every aspect of recruiting, right? The how you present yourself, communication, and obviously the technicals. But I think it's really the most comprehensive program currently in the, I'd say the top 25 MBAs.
That's incredible. So tell us about, you say like it helps to go through the process with people who've done it before. I assume you're referring to what, second year students? There are probably some coaches that have been through the process, maybe experienced as well. But who do you mean by that?
Yeah, it's mostly the second year students who do it. And, the alumni also help a lot. And I think that's another unique thing about UNC is that the alumni really take a very active role in recruiting. They'll really push for you if they think you're a good candidate, and they'll help prep you as well, which I don't know. There might be other schools that do that, but I haven't heard about that at any other school. So that's one of the reasons, I was drawn to UNC, and I think the program has really like kind of exceeded my expectations.
That's awesome. Which other programs? So UNC, which other programs do you think someone who's considering investment banking, where should they be looking?
Sure. So I'll kind of give you the tiers in my view. I think everybody knows like, Wharton, and those schools. So I'll kind of go from like, the 10 rank to up. So I think some, in the 10 to 15, I don't know where all the rankings are. I think some of the good schools that I've seen and, seen students and heard about the processes, I think are, Duke, UVA, Tuck, Michigan do really well in recruiting. And I think the one that really punches above its weight kind of in that that ranking is Cornell. They also have a very structured process. The alumni are also very involved. And I think, if you're considering investment banking, I've talked to people who went to other programs who maybe were higher ranked than those like, 4 or 5 I just said, who had a much harder time because you're kind of left to your own devices. So those are the best kind of in that ranking. Then the next, I'd say for the 16 to 20, I think UNC is the best. And you can look at the numbers; they're easily accessible online. Again, very structured process. Alumni that are very involved, and then just overall placement is really good. And then in addition, one thing that UNC has that I think other schools and some other schools, even the top 15, don't have is that they place a lot of people in Charlotte, which gives them kind of an edge because obviously proximity, and just it's very hard to get face time at those banks if you're not in a program that's there. So that's like an extra edge that UNC has that some other schools don't have. So that's kind of the, I'd say 16 to 20. And then the next in the top 20 to 25, I'd say is Georgetown. So Georgetown also very structured process, also run by the second years, close proximity to New York. And then also there's a couple of, satellite offices and smaller advisories in DC that like basically recruit exclusively from Georgetown, from the MBA process. So as you're going through the rankings, those are kind of the best options. I forgot about NYU. That's an obvious one. And I'd say NYU of like, I think it's a top 10 school right now. I'm not so like familiar with the rankings, but I'd say that's another one that's in the top 10, but not like a Wharton that I think punches well above its weight. Not as structured a process, but you have the added benefit of being in New York, which I think helps them a lot.
Helps for coffee chats, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Cool. Okay. Well, thanks a lot for that. So let's say that I have applied. I've applied for an MBA. Maybe I've got an admit to one of the schools that you've named. What can I do between getting the admit and actually starting the program?
Yeah, this is super important, and a lot of people tell you, don't worry, the program will get you ready. That's true, but it really helps a lot if you start earlier. The number one thing I would do is start talking to second years who had internships at banks that you're interested in. So go through LinkedIn, we can all do it. Figure out who went where, what you're interested in, and talk with them and ask them about the experience. Number one, it shows that you're interested and you're really trying to prepare as soon as possible. But number two, you can have a really good idea of which banks you want to target before you even set foot on campus. So that's really huge. The other thing, if you're trying to pivot and you don't really have a finance background, there's a lot of courses online that are like several $100 that will really, really put you ahead of the curve. There's so when I was just to give a little more background, I worked in biotech venture capital before. I focused mainly on scientific due diligence. So switching from that to a middle market private equity fund was a bit of a jump for me. And I did the Corporate Finance Institute Financial Modeling and Valuation Analyst program. And that really, was all I kind of needed to be able to do the job. And I think if anyone's trying to switch to IB, that's a really good program. You don't have to use that one. There's some other ones like Wall Street Prep, Breaking into Wall Street, Trading the Street. Trading the Street is really good. I'd say Trading the Street is probably the best, but any of them will really do. But yeah, so I would do that. And then the other thing that you can do is there is something called the 400 questions guide. I would try to understand all the, after you do the Breaking into Wall Street, Corporate Finance Institute, Trading the Street program, I would look at the 400 questions and say, can I answer all these basic questions in my head without a calculator, like it'll be in an interview? And that's really, really going to put you very far ahead of most people and really set you up for success. Sorry?
Those are technical interview questions, 400 technical interview questions.
400 IB technical interview questions. They also have a part before that is general like fit questions, which are also very good, and you should practice answering. Those are like I said, very important also.
That's super, super good advice. Okay, next question then is, so how did the resources at the school help you on like the communications side? So you said that like actually like the way you present yourself is super important, and the way you handle, and the way you communicate. Obviously, we all know an MBA program teaches like how to do a evaluation analysis or whatever. But how did they teach you the soft stuff?
Yeah, so there's a great course at UNC, Management Communication, which is actually taken after you're done recruiting, but that actually was super, super helpful. But the program in general for IB recruiting, it's done through the clubs. So the second years really focus on that. They really pay attention to how you're presenting yourself, how you dress is a big thing in IB, and how you'll have networking events, and they'll be watching you to see how you do, how you interact with people, and then they'll critique you. And then, also you've had coffee chats with them, and they'll critique you during the coffee chat and help you, get your story down, explain, why you wanted to go to IB. And you really can't have good advice on that if you haven't had someone who's done it before. You need someone who's gone through the process. So that's why I think it's not really handled by the school so much as it's handled by the second years, because unless like the person they're hiring has gone through the process, they're not really going to be helpful, which I think is something unique about IB, because there are at UNC, and I know there are at other schools, there are coaches that help you kind of, present yourself. But again, IB is a different animal, so it's not really so useful to have sessions with them.
Yeah. And just generally coming up with that narrative about where you were before, why you want to go into IB. Obviously, you can't just say, I want a bigger paycheck. You got to have you got to have a story. You got to be able to communicate.
Yeah, and I would also caution people, like, even if that's your like real goal, I would caution you against going into IB, because the hours are long and it's very, very hard to do something, knowing that at the end of the month you're going to get a big paycheck if you don't really enjoy it. You really have to find the stuff interesting. and you kind of have to have that drive of curiosity to be able to work, past 12, when you only maybe had 6 hours of sleep the night before. It really has to really interest you. But yeah, obviously, when you're doing these interviews and networking sessions, you have to have a good story. And honestly, that's like 40 to 50% of how they're going to judge you is that story of why IB. Because again, they don't want someone who's just looking for a paycheck, because those people don't last long.
Yeah.
Turnover is very high, and if you are one of those people, you'll you'll be found out very soon, because you'll leave, and so yeah.
In that way, it's just very similar to an MBA application. They don't want someone who's just there for
Exactly.
paper. They want people who are genuinely interested in the school and genuinely interested in the topic. And
Yeah,
it's the same for bank applications. Yeah,
for
completely.
sure. Yeah.
So now that you've got to, in a way, the end game. I mean, you still need to survive a cutthroat investment banking experience. But looking back at the last 3 years, which is really how long it's taken you, if you include the GMAT, you include your MBA
Yes.
applications, you include the MBA itself. Look back at the last 3 years. What would you have done differently?
Hmm. That's a good point. One thing is, okay, what would I have done differently? I'm trying to think of each part. So let's start with prepping. So for the GMAT, I would have hired a tutor sooner. I'm generally a good test taker, so I thought I could do it on my own. I did very well, even the first time I took it without a tutor, but I'd say by yourself, your max is like 730, 740, and you're not going to get higher than that without a tutor. It's just you need someone who really knows the test. At that point, it's not knowledge; it's understanding how the test works, what type of questions you're going to get. Like you need a tutor to really push you. I think most people, obviously, there's geniuses who could probably get like a 780, 790 right now just sitting down. But I think for most people to get to that next level, you really need a tutor. So that's one thing. The next thing is, if there's a big difference between your actual score and your practice scores, I would keep pushing, because you really should be able to get within at least 20 points of your practice score. So that was, I think, some of the mistakes I made. And you mentioned that I should use a tutor, and I was hesitant. So you were definitely right on that. The next one is, when you're applying to schools, make sure you you're networking with. This is it starts as early as when you're applying to schools. You need to start networking with the admission people and second years. A lot of schools have a internal reference system, where if someone talks to them and they like them, they can write to the school very quickly, and it goes straight to admissions. Hey, I talked to this person. They're really interested. I think they'll accept because of this and this reason. So that's really important. And then when you're talking with the admissions people, you really need to, a lot of this is distinguishing yourself. Who are they going to take? The person who got, is in the mid range. There's a lot of people who score in the mid range, 720, 730, have a 3.6 GPA, right? There's a ton of people that apply to every school that have those numbers. So how do you distinguish yourself? One is through your application, right? Your application needs to be very well written, and obviously you have given a lot of thought into it, and that needs to be shown through your application. But the other way is showing them that you're interested, is networking with them. And most of the admissions people will talk to you if they've seen you in events. There's a lot of online events. You don't have to go to the school. You can register for online events. You'll meet admissions people, ask a good question. They'll remember you. And then if they send you an email, if you send them an email, chances are they'll have a one-on-one Zoom, 15 to 20 minutes with you, which is, invaluable in the process. It's going to be very hard for you to get it rejected from a school, assuming you come off well, if you had one of those conversations and you're, within their range. And yeah, so those are some things that I think are important, and I think maybe I could have implemented earlier. Okay, now what was the next part of it?
The next part
We're
was then getting into investment banking.
then getting into investment banking. Okay, so during the process, there were a few mistakes I made. My story became a little too rehearsed, and it was noted that it came off a little too rehearsed. So I think you should have a general framework, but don't say the exact same thing. Like let it flow from your brain, because when you have something memorized versus when you're genuinely telling someone, it comes off different, and most people can tell, especially if the part. The next thing is, I think I sweated the little things a little too much. Like, you're sending thank you emails to all these people you're networking with. I spent like a lot of time stressing over, do I say this or do I say that?
Yeah.
You know, I think it seems really important at the time, but as long as like it's not crazy, like you're fine. Another thing is that, I think sleep is key. I think for the recruiting process, I think for you, at least for me, and I think a lot of other people work like this as well. In order to have good interactions with people and be social, you need to have good sleep. And those, 45 minutes or a couple hours of you cranking technicals the night before probably won't help you as much as just getting a full 8 hours. Uh, this is kind of a funny story, but I had a last round interview with a bank, and I had accidentally taken or eaten a caffeine cookie the day before. And if you don't know, caffeine cookies, like, yeah, you get caffeine, but it's not like a drink where it gets out of your system. Like, it takes a while. And I had it at like 2 p.m. I didn't fall asleep till 3. That was by far my worst final interview. And I completely botched it just to like, unfortunately, having eaten that cookie and only getting like, I don't know, 6 hours of sleep versus 8. And stuff like that happens. It's out of your control, but I think it goes to show just how important sleep is, and in allowing you to express your personality
And
well.
playing the numbers game so that you have enough
Yeah,
irons in the fire that you can have a shit night's sleep for one of them.
that's another thing. That's another thing. I think people focus too much on the name and prestige of the bank. You should focus on where's good fit for you. If you're not someone who doesn't want to work 110 hours, don't go to certain banks and then be surprised when you only put in, I don't know, 70, 60 hours during the internship, and you don't get a return. Like, there's different expectations at every bank, and um, you know, as long as the bank is doing deals and it's something you're interested in, I think you really need to consider. There are a lot of great middle market banks. And I think the name, like, people put way too much emphasis on the name, I think is another thing that I don't think I made that mistake, but I saw other people make those mistakes.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Alex, thank you so much for your insight here. It's
Of course.
super, super valuable, both from the MBA side and also from the investment banking side. Honestly, gold dust. If you're watching this, listen to what Alex is saying. He's been through the process. He's absolutely spot on. Alex, really, really nice to see you again. Thank you very, very much for your time. And good luck in the next the next chapter of your career.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Can I get
appreciate
a
it. Yeah, we can do a high five. It's been a long road, man. I appreciate all your help. So thank you so much.
Pleasure. See you soon.
All right. Have a good one. Bye.